Today we are going to be playing Carved in Stone. This is a fantasy romance type of game. So let's see. We're going to go with the streamer friendly version. Okay, so always and forever. Scattered golden rays forced their way through the congested gray skies, reflecting off the wide assortment of potion bottles on the back wall. I continued to sweep the floors and watched as the dust and dirt flutter and glitter in the sunlight. As I swept my way behind the counter, I caught a glimpse of something shiny in a broken mirror. Something I couldn't bring myself to ignore. As I peered closer, I felt my heart turn to stone. What I saw was a singular silver hair. Reaching tentatively with my fingers, I lifted the single strand to further inspect, hoping that my eyes were failing me, or preferably that I'd gotten some lint in my hair from sweeping the floors. No such luck. It was a cruel twist of fate, a clear sign of my age staring back at me, almost taunting. Yeah, know that feeling. I closed my eyes, pinched the bridge of my nose, and cursed time itself. Alright, Missy. A dirty little man grunted, startling me out of my morning session, the sun nearly disappearing. It was the town drunkard. I did what I could to put my best customer service voice and welcoming smile. What can I get for you today, sir? You got any more of that stuff? His description wasn't especially helpful. I hoped he hadn't mistaken my shop for the liquor store. I'm afraid you'll have to be a touch more specific. Oh, the blue stuff. It helps settle my stomach. Oh, I know what tincture you're looking for. Give me just a moment. I turned, inspecting any of the blue bottles I found on the shelf, eventually finding the exact medicine he was referring to. How much do I owe you? That'll be 4 silver pieces. 4 silver pieces. Awfully steep, don't you think? I resist the urge to roll my eyes. It hadn't been too much other times. Was he trying to purposely be a bother today? Was he that bored? I work in retail. We're sticking with this. Well, I'm terribly sorry, but that's the price. It's difficult to get a hold of, and my vendor had to raise the prices to accommodate. There's nothing I can do. I can't go any lower. There was a beat too long of uncomfortable silence, until he made a horrible mouth sound and spat on the floor just that I had just finished cleaning. I sucked in my bottom lip to keep myself from doing something I regret. Now my stomach was swirling. No wonder you're such a shrewd wench like you hasn't found a husband. It stung more than I cared to admit. Normally, I'd have just written it off as babbling of an unpleasant man. But somehow today, or rather lately, these sorts of comments dug their way under my skin more than usual. You should be more focused on finding one before you end up dying alone in this place. If you don't starve first, with your prices being the way they are. A devil you are, overcharging a poor old man. I fought for this village when it came under attack by a dragon, you know. Just so you could overcharge your savers, you ungrateful bitch. That's enough. His eyes grew wide, somehow surprised by my outburst. He made a move into his garments, and I braced myself for the worst, reaching for the broom I'd set aside behind me. But before I could so much as lift it off the ground, there was another voice.
Drop it, lest you lose your hand right along with it.
The haggard man froze for a moment before swinging in the direction of the voice. I hadn't even heard anyone else come in. And who the hell do you think you are talking to? His voice lost all momentum as his eyes registered the man towering over him in the doorway. I recognized him. He was a regular. Though I didn't know his name, I'd never had the courage to ask. The man stood blinking at him stupidly.
You need to leave.
The room was filled with a sudden chill, accompanied by an ominous aura radiating from the man, one the likes I'd never felt before. It sent the drunkard scrambling for the doorway, nearly tripping over his feet as he did so. The man watched in disgust as he fled.
Cunt.
His dark expression and aura dissolved by the time he met my eyes, sending a chill down my spine, the last remnants of the sudden cold that had come when he threatened the bothersome man. When did it get so drafty in here?
Are you okay?
He asked, saving me from my thoughts of more potential repairs. Fine. I growled in the direction of where the drunkard had stood before. You should check on him. He probably cracked his skull against the pavement, I said, gesturing to the door with my head. He was about to get a broom handle down his throat had you not stepped in when you did. Luckily, I wasn't in any real danger. He could barely stand, let alone stab me. The striking man bit back a laugh, smiling to himself. I'm thankful you handled it for me.
It wasn't an issue, madam.
I lifted my hands as if to ward off the pleasantries. You can just call me Jinx. Ma'am or madam makes me feel old.
Well, I'd hate to make you feel old.
It was too late for that, unfortunately.
I'm surprised I never asked for your name before. It's very fitting. If you don't mind me saying so, it's lovely. Just like yourself.
Ooh. Flattery, huh? He didn't need to compliment me, especially if there was no real truth to it. It felt like he was doing everything possible to ease my nerves. At least it seemed genuine, and was a nice change of pace from the conversation before. I'm fine. It's not the worst of what I've encountered running this place. You're too kind, young man, I retort good-naturedly.
You can trust me when I say I'm no boy.
Oop. A devilish smirk graced his sharp features, his eyes squinting in amusement. My breath got caught in my throat at the mere sight. His age was evident. He was all man, that much was for sure. Sure, he wasn't a fresh-faced youth, but he definitely wasn't old. Mature was a better phrase. Well-aged was better. He looked pristine. Even in 10 years, I'd imagine he still looked that way. But men had a luxury to mature, whereas women just expired, apparently. The thought had always sickened me. There were beautiful aged women who wore their white hair like crowns, but evidently I wasn't one of those women. My crown was made out of eroding poison. And your name? He smiled widely.
Carrick.
Carrick. I tested his name absentmindedly. He flashed me a toothy smile, watching my lips as I said it.
It certainly sounds better when you say it.
I shook my head, blood rushing to my cheeks. Was there something I could get you?
I'd like to buy whatever that gentleman was going to, as well as my usual. It's the least I can do, since I made you lose some business.
Oh, that's kind of you, but you don't have to. It's no trouble. His coin is worth nothing to me.
Perhaps mine will have more value?
A cheeky smile graced his features. I nodded, smiling, looking down at my hands on the counter.
Actually, I'm going to browse for a bit. If you could get me those other two things, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. The rock polish, right? That's what you usually get?
You remembered. You're good at your job.
I wave off his compliments as well as him. Luckily, he gave me something to recover from his overwhelming presence. I'd always found him a fine-looking man, but seeing him close, watching him speak and smile at me, say such kind things, it made me feel like a teenager. He's simply gorgeous, almost ethereal beauty, which, much like a painting or statue carved from stone. Carrick. He's always been a regular for at least a year. He suddenly appeared one day around the time they started building the new cathedral across the way. Maybe he works in the chantry. He didn't really look the type, but who was I to say? Oddly, though, I don't think I've ever seen him shop during the day. Perhaps his job kept him busy while the sun was up. What kind of job would someone like him have? I suppose I could ask him, though every time I think about talking to him, I get so nervous. He's too enchanting. He's too enticing. Couldn't be a priest, because if so, he'd make many a sinner. Maybe he built the cathedral? He certainly has the muscle for it. I'd wish I'd seen him build it. Watching his muscles tense, dripped with sweat, glowing in the hot afternoon sun, breathing heavy, drinking water as it dripped down his body. I watched as he poked and prodded some of the bottles around the room, practically gliding as he moved. His hair was luxurious, his eyes a deep shade of red, and he had near-perfect skin. He was a marvel. How could someone like him have ever called me lovely? Perhaps he was just being nice. If I was 10 years younger, I'd have caught his eye. My body was better. No sagging underarms, no bags under my eyes, no gray hairs. If only he could have seen me then. It was a shame. Time truly was a curse, at least when you were a woman. Perhaps it was nice to pretend his words had real meaning. The only men who take a fancy to me now were drunkards and the desperate. How long had it been since I'd been with a man? It felt like decades, even if maybe only a couple years had passed. Even so, the relationships were short-lived. I'd always preferred my work, my own company, over something so shallow. Sex was serviceable. It felt good while it lasted, but it was never very long, ended right as I was feeling good, probably because the proper pounding happened right as he was about to come. I could make myself much harder with less headache. Perhaps Carrick was beautiful, but beautiful didn't equate to a skillful lover. Perhaps he could be my late-night fantasies, however. I'd end up skulking so much. I hadn't seen Carrick return initially. His eyebrows knitted together in concern.
I know it isn't my business, but I apologize on behalf of that bastard. I can't stop thinking about it.
No, please, you don't have to. I really am fine. He didn't look convinced, however. Hell, even I didn't buy it. But I had to be fine. I had to believe it somehow. I couldn't let any of what he said get to me. I couldn't listen to anyone when it came to how I felt about myself. That was a recipe for certain disaster. I suppose he said it quite harshly, but there was truth to what he said. Carrick gave me a dumbfounded look. Maybe he was young, but I didn't think that was that hard a concept to grasp. I guess I am a good deal older than you. I'm sure one day you'll understand, though. Or maybe you never will because you're drop-dead gorgeous and a man. Women my age, there's a certain set of things we're expected to do. And of those, being married and having children are two I have yet to engage with. There's a good chance I won't experience either. He stares at me astonished. I probably should have let it go. I'd argued my stance on this far too many times with far too many people. He wouldn't understand, and I didn't need to explain myself. Even so, I did. I suppose it had come naturally to me at that point. I do realize how strange it is for me to be a woman with her own business. People wonder if I'm desperate or lonely. I honestly don't think so. The happiest days of my life was when the shop opened. I was finally able to put my magic to good use and sell potions that help people. I realized only then what I was doing. I'd said my piece, he didn't care, time to change the subject and pretend that hadn't happened. Oh, your potions, I'm sorry, let me get that for you.
Wait.
And I did, like I was being compelled to.
You don't have to do anything.
Now that it was my turn to be confused. I said I'd get you those items. I got distracted. I guess I'm getting tired. The older I get, the earlier I go to bed. Oof, I know that one.
Why do you speak as though you were on death's door?
The words lost me. I didn't know how to respond. Why did I? I mean, I guess I'm not elderly, but I'm not the young woman I was when I opened this place. I even have gray hair now, see? Carrick didn't even look. He was still looking at me like I'd smashed his polish onto the floor.
Is that why?
Why what?
Why you've been so down?
My silence must have been his answer.
Look, if I may say so, I think that's complete and utter bullshit.
I look around, feeling uncomfortable once again. Had I upset him? Where did I place that broom?
You don't need to have kids or get married. You run one of the most successful shops in town. You're thoughtful and hardworking. And, if I may be so bold, a fine woman.
I felt my throat tighten. I had to cough and wipe my nose to be rid of the forming tears. His words cut deep. Please, you don't have to say this. I'm not one to delude myself. I'm a practical person. You don't need to appeal to my emotions or anything.
Please don't listen to that lowly fool. Or anyone. You must know your worth.
My stomach flipped involuntarily at his tone. His words were so warm, they resonated somewhere deep within me. A tear slipped down my face and onto the counter below. I could only touch it, shocked, deeply touched, more than I realized, like he'd spoken to part of me that was out of my reach. I moved to the door, going to lock it, not letting myself stand in place sobbing in front of a stranger. I could tell by the way the sky looked that it was nearing closing time. I didn't care if I closed earlier than usual today. Carrick was behind me preparing to leave. Or at least that's what I thought. My apologies. You can stay if you'd like. I just wanted to get a start on closing. I don't want anyone else to walk in.
So, it's alright if I stay?
I nodded. Yes, I don't mind. Honestly, it was good to have him there in case that drunkard decided he wanted to come back for round 2. Let me check you out. We made our way back to the counter. I finally retrieved the rock polish and the blue tonic, and Carrick set down a common healing potion. Will this be all? I asked, going through the normal sequence of questioning without thinking. He nodded, just watching me. It'll be 6 silvers. He went to retrieve his pouch and set the silvers onto the counter. What is this rock polish for, anyway? Do you work at the cathedral across the way? He looked as if he hadn't expected that. He was so taken aback, I almost regretted asking in the first place. Did he think me weird for asking?
You could say that. I spend a lot of time there.
Did you help build it?
No, well, the truth of the matter is that it's complicated.
A mysterious one. He was involved in some shady business? That would explain the dark aura and the fact that he was so muscular. Maybe he was a hitman or involved in underground criminal organizations. Maybe he was the devil himself. He certainly had the look for it.
The shop's closed now, right?
I nodded.
Does that mean I can speak to you as a person, rather than a shopkeeper?
I could only chuckle at that, unsure of what he meant. What is it that you want to say to me that you can't say to a shopkeeper?
At the risk of making you uncomfortable, I feel it's best I be honest with you. Is that okay? If you don't like what I have to say, I'll leave. And I won't bother you any further. And if you wish it so, I won't even shop here anymore.
As he continued, a heaviness formed in my chest. Just what was he wanting to talk about? Was he sent here to kill me? Had I done bad business?
So can I tell you?
Oh, yeah. You can. What do you want to tell me? It seems important. My anxiety only grew as he looked around, looking for a way to say what he was trying to. Was it that bad? The waiting was sure to kill me. So he finally spoke, slow at first.
I lied before.
About? I must have asked with my eyes.
I already knew your name. It is lovely. Just like you. That part was true.
That was it? He lied about not knowing my name? That was certainly strange, but it wasn't anything to make such a fuss about.
The truth is, I know a lot about you. More than you think I do.
That stopped me in my tracks.
I've watched you for a while.
What?
Just as you worked.
Because you spend so much of your time at the cathedral? I asked, hoping that was it, hoping even more that he wouldn't lie about it either.
Yes, precisely. I also have made it a habit to visit here more. To see you.
Why? I asked stupidly.
Because I'm drawn to you. I have been for years.
Years? How many?
3 years. The same amount of time since the cathedral was built.
Why are you telling me this? What do you want? It was a dangerous question, with an answer I don't think I was prepared to hear. Even so, it was better to know. Why? He bit his lip.
Is it not obvious?
He smiled wryly.
Maybe. You just want to hear me say it.
I nodded. That wasn't false. I didn't want to misinterpret this. Best I hear it directly from the source.
I'm telling you this because I want you to be mine. And more than that, I want to be yours.
What difference was there between being his or being mine? More importantly, had he said what I thought he just said?
It's honestly disheartening to see you so doubtful. Even though I'm telling you this, clear as day. You can't believe it.
I stopped myself. I could only blink as he continued to speak.
Is my longing for you that hard to believe? What happened to break your confidence so?
I dropped my head. Truthfully, I didn't know. There wasn't a singular instance that turned me from a bright-eyed, bold girl into a gray-haired, tentative woman. Perhaps it was the natural order of things. I just grew up.
But I've only known you for 3 years. Are you truly a different woman?
I thought back. No, I wasn't. But with every year watching the amount of people who'd come to settle in the village, the refugees flooding the cathedral, I watched women become brides and mothers in the same year. I never really wanted for those things, at least not to the extent others had. I never sought them out, but being looked at differently, being compared to them and how different my life was to theirs, I felt like I was doing everything in my life wrong. Like my very existence was an outlier, a mistake, something that should have never come to be. Even though this was the life I cried, sweated, and prayed for, I couldn't find joy in it the way I once had, not when I shared it alone. I don't know how to answer that, Carrick. All I know is that I haven't felt comfortable in my own skin for a long time. He watched me with pity. It hurt. I disappointed him, but he wasn't alone. I was disappointed in myself. How had I let those opinions of others corrode me so? I'm sorry, the woman you pined for doesn't exist anymore. She may never again. Carrick shook his head. I'm sure he was in denial, as absurd as that was. But what I said was true. I said it before, I'm practical. I might not like it, but that is the way of things. I don't make these rules, I just have to live by them.
Nothing has changed. Your essence, it's the same. It's just dulled.
My essence? What did he mean? I didn't ask. It was written all over my face.
I've noticed that your soul has changed. I've watched it waver like the flame of a long-burning candle. But it isn't too late. It can be remedied.
How exactly? Even when all I could think about was how absurd all this was, I still kept bringing myself to inquire further.
I honestly don't know. Maybe it's foolish, but I thought maybe if I told you, you'd be able to find out for yourself. You're very intelligent. If you don't know now, you will. But that is the main thing I wanted to tell you. I know it's hard, but your core, the main part of your soul, is still there. It's just being dimmed. You have to find the spark to ignite it again. It may feel hopeless now, but it's not permanent. You just have to be patient with yourself and make peace with the changing of the seasons.
That made it click. Even when I lacked all of the critical information, the intricacies behind it, the words he spoke, I still managed to feel relief. The weight in my chest lifted ever so slightly. Maybe it was hard to believe he could see my soul. Perhaps it was figurative, but there was truth to it. I've been so upset by such minor things because it added to a truth about myself that I was starting to believe, adhering to a reality that wasn't my own. This time no tears fell, but I felt a deep ache in my body. My nerves were on fire. An involuntary smile snuck its way onto my face.
There she is.
He said almost a whisper, matching my own smile. He looked at me like I'd come down from the celestial realms.
I suppose my work here is done. You're remarkable. You struggle so much, mostly alone. And yet you don't let it harden you. You're still as fiery, as passionate about your work, and your effect on the people around you, as I imagine you always had. You truly inspire me.
Carrick, why are you being so kind? It hurts.
You need to hear it. And if you're still willing to listen, I could tell you more. Remind you of what you've forgotten.
I could only nod, still not understanding, but willing to listen. I took a seat on the counter, resting my aching feet and ankles. He watched me all the way, moving his hand closer once I sat, not quite touching. I could tell he was debating touching me, like I'd burn him if he did. Filled with a newfound boldness, I set my hand on his. He looked at me in surprise, but I didn't address it, following through with what he was going to say instead. I listened intently.
I was drawn to you from the moment I saw you. Of course, it wasn't love like in the poems, but rather fascination. Like the answer to a question that plagues the masses. You were my unanswered question. And so I watched, and learned much about you. And watching you is easy, of course. You're an enchanting woman.
Can you not feel the souls of others? Is it just mine? I decided to ask, almost humoring him. I couldn't say I believed in it, but I wanted to hear what he'd say.
I can feel others. Anyone who I choose to. That drunkard was almost tainted and rotten.
I don't know if I can believe that. He just seems sad. I don't think he's broken or anything. He's just in a bad place, misguided.
That's a wonderful trait of yours. And you're not wrong. He can change. But it means he'd have to want to change. And so many don't. Even after the horrible things he said to you. You show him so much courtesy and respect.
I shrugged. Of all things. I suppose it was just my nature. I didn't like the bastard. It was true, but that didn't mean he was damned.
We all see our ugliest sides. And we let them become who we are, instead of fighting against them.
I felt guilty, as clearly I too was susceptible to this. What is your ugly side, Carrick? He paused, chewing over his response for a moment.
I'm obsessed.
Obsessed? With? But I already knew the answer.
With a question. Would you give me the time of day?
That was the question? Would I give him the time of day? I can't say. I don't know what that would entail for me, for us.
Only as much as you were willing to give.
I just know so little. What I do know is good, but it makes me worry there's plenty you're hiding. I don't know if I'd like the ugly side of you.
I believe I could help remedy that.
How so? I always figured those were the kinds of things you experienced over time.
Now, before I do what I'm about to, I need you to promise me that you'll try to stay calm.
I thought for a moment, contemplating once again if I wanted to know. Ultimately, I felt like we'd come this far. I wanted to give him a chance. I promise I'll try. Oh. It was silent, almost deafeningly so. I watched in pure shock as horns sprouted from his head, wings from his back, his body swelling in size. His shirt had given way to his chest growing, the garment splitting and falling to the floor between us. Along with it, his boots split into pieces, and in place were taloned feet. Before long, he just stood in his new form, towering over me even more than he had before. I sat in awe, paralyzed as I studied him, not sure what I felt other than an ever-present feeling of sudden arousal. It only added to my ever-growing confusion. He looked terrified.
Are you all right? Did I scare you?
I shook my head slowly. Not scared. I didn't say what I was feeling because the reality was something I felt I should be admitting to at the moment.
Do I look weird?
I shook my head. By normal standards, sure, but to me, he was the same alluring man. His presence had somehow reached a level I hadn't thought possible. He was more than a painting or a statue. He was a league of his own. He was, by all definitions, a masterpiece. It was many more moments before either of us made a sound. Surprisingly, I was the first to break the silence, speaking a truth I denied myself before in fear. A fear that didn't come natural to me, that had come from feeling rejected by everyone around me. Carrick hadn't, though, and so I spoke the truth, and I cast away my shock. You are the most beautiful being I've ever seen. His face reddened at that. He smiled softly, unable to form a sentence, so I did it for him. Just what are you exactly?
Demon? That's what your people would call me. However, my experiences are mostly human. I eat, I sleep. I have fears and I have desires. But I am also only able to be when the sun is gone.
Is that why I never saw him during the day? He was nocturnal?
Those guardians built atop the cathedral. Those stone creatures. That's what I am during the day.
A gargoyle, you mean? He nodded.
The human word, yes.
Why show this form to me? I could have screamed or sent a mob after you. Why take that risk? The answer came easily to him.
I knew you wouldn't. And I was right. More importantly, I showed you because it's something you must know if you're to decide whether or not you want me to be yours.
The more he spoke about the prospect of him being mine, it became ever so slightly real. By be yours, do you mean as a friend or I had to force the words out, the fear of rejection threatening me to stop me. As a lover. I hated to even say it. If it was the former, how could I look at myself in the mirror? I'd have to break it more just to avoid that reality. I hated myself for feeling that way after I just decided to cast my fears aside. I suppose I didn't know the source didn't necessarily mean solve the problem.
I've never thought of friends the way I think of you.
My heart swelled, my stomach fluttered, my palms sweat so much that my hands started to slip on the counter below me. I was made more aware of my body in his presence as he stood dangerously close now. His eyes were even more intense in this form, especially when he spoke such desires into existence. A shadow was cast over me by his sheer presence. The clock was ticking. He was wanting the answer he'd obsessed over. But could I give it to him? Or would my body speak for me, and I'd grow to regret my decision later? The truth of the matter was I was already attracted to Carrick, but seeing the sight of him only added to it. It was easy enough to say that what he wanted to hear, when all I wanted was to feel the form that stood before me flesh against my own, so much smaller in comparison, to know what he smelt like, felt like, tasted like. I hadn't thought I was ever a prospect for someone like him, even more so now that I knew what he truly was. Even now I couldn't wrap my head around it, but I was practical. He was here before me saying his intention. I could ask anything I wanted to know right now. I didn't need to wrap my head around it when I could explore him for myself, like I had when I mixed ingredients and potions. I had to see what worked. I had to run a shop for years to truly understand the intricacies that came with being a business owner. I had to dig my hands into the earth in order to make sense of reality when it began to slip. Carrick, tell me, what is it about me physically that you're drawn to? His demeanor shifted, his smirk finally returning as he leaned down closer to me, still not quite touching.
Could I show you instead?
Show me? Should I, or would I be doing myself harm? Enough. Thoughts don't really belong here. They are paralyzing. They are counterintuitive in an experiment. Results first, then think it over later. Please do. That was all the permission he needed. His hand rose, now easily double the size it was before, and I almost lost my nerve. Two of his fingers alone were larger than half of the men's dicks I'd been with. It made me wonder, what did that mean for his? I had to know. His hand hovered for a moment before his fingers found their way into my hair, pushing the strands behind my ear. Far more gentle than I thought possible for someone who looked like him.
Your hair.
He looked at me for a moment, for the first time able to see the subject of his desire so close. His hand moved to my cheek, a thumb tracing my cheekbone.
Your eyes.
The warmth of his palm, of his thumb trailing its way down my face, only stopping when it reached my lips. That alone sent an electric shock through my mind.
And especially your lips.
He stood watching me, watch him as he slowly began parting them just enough so he could run his thumb across the length of my bottom lip. His expression changed from something adoring to something more sedated, his eyes practically dilating. We both knew what it was. We both knew what was to come next at that moment. Words were no longer our friends. We'd spoke plenty now. It was time to act. I opened my mouth to trace my tongue along his thumb, wrapping my lips around it in order to properly taste it. I practically drooled at the sensation. I tasted of nothing but my own saliva, and still I was already going lightheaded. I peeked out of one eye to see his expression. His eyes were glazed over as he watched me.
Why does that feel so good?
I couldn't answer him, nor would I. I was determined not to say another word unless it was screaming his name. I spread my legs as I continued to step, beckoning him to fill the space in any way he saw fit. I hoped he wouldn't lose his nerve. He'd said all the right things, now to see if he could put it into action. He wanted me, right? He watched me. He waited this long to say anything. Had he touched himself to the thought of me? How much had he envisioned in this moment? I wanted to give him all those things, but there would be time to speak again later. Luckily, he stood closer, removing his thumb from my mouth. The trail of spit hung between them for a second. He leaned in close. It was only when he stood before me that his nerves seemed to falter.
Can I kiss you?
Or perhaps not. He only looked like it had. He almost looked like a young man at that moment. Had he not known the touch of another? I only answered by bringing my hands to his face and pulling him to my hungry lips. There was one clear way to find out, regardless of his history. I was experienced enough for us two. Perhaps I could train him into a suitable lover. That thought excited me. He groaned against me. His lips were warm and plump. It was uncomfortably slow as he kissed me so gently. It was wonderful, but it wasn't enough. I gave him my tongue, which he met with his own deliciously. He had the makeup of a wonderful lover if his kiss was anything to go off of. He'd definitely been kissed before, and I found it hard to imagine anyone getting to this point without him and not falling under his spell. He tasted like water from a fresh, cool spring. It had been so long since I'd been kissed, but I hadn't forgotten the basics. He'd gone slow enough that I had ample time to remember the little things that made men fall to their knees. I breathed into him, tangling my fingers into his long, silky hair. Our lips worked away at each other, moving between soft, loving kisses to famished tongues, satiating each other. I moaned into his mouth as he started to untie the bindings on my dress. I practically heard the celebratory sound of trumpets as he leisurely undid them without so much as even looking. His kissing hadn't suffered either. That theory of him never having been with any previous lovers before was eroding away with every passing minute. I melted into our kiss, his tongue dancing with mine, exploring every corner of my mouth thoroughly. The sensation was equal parts plenty and not enough. Carrick only broke away to move the dress off my shoulders and down to my waist, studying my figure. I did what I could not to tense up, but he had no such reservations. He never said much. His blushing cheeks, hazy eyes, and dangerously sizable bulge were indicator enough. I shivered in the cool air as my nipples hardened. He was awestruck just watching shamelessly. I found his expression cute and rewarded him by giving him a show. I ran my hand, or rather my fingers, up purposely, over my navel to my chest bone. I watched his eyes follow my hand as I cupped one of my breasts, giving it a gentle squeeze before tracing my fingers over the hardened nipple. So hard that they felt good by my own touch, though I imagine nothing compared to his. It was as if I was signaling to a wild beast. He closed the distance between us in a mere moment. His hands roamed freely over my body, tracing the curves of my breasts, teasing my nipples into somehow even more hardened peaks. I squeaked at the sensation. I had grown quite sensitive to another's touch in this time. I suppose that boded well. I couldn't decide if I was embarrassed or impressed by how riled up I was already. So when his mouth made his way from my lips to my cheek, to my chin, to my neck, and all the way down to that very same nipple, I ended up throwing my head back. I hissed at the feeling of his tongue circling it, flicking it, his lips, and when he felt bold enough, teeth grabbed on and pulled to send me into a fit. My hips rolled into him, delighted by what I felt, a dampness through his pants, something I'd already guessed was more than I'd ever experienced, but I wasn't afraid. What will you do with me, Carrick? Can you feel in my soul how much I want you in this moment? His large hand gripped my thighs, lifting me effortlessly. I squealed in surprise, giggling to ensure he hadn't done anything wrong. His mouth left my breasts in favor of smirking at me where I was wrapped within his arms. I'd always thought myself quite sturdy. It would have been an effort for the average individual to lift my toe off the ground, let alone hold me as if I were a sack of flour rather than a full-grown woman. It felt incredibly delicate and free in his grasp.
Is this okay? I wanted to take this to your bedroom.
I touched his face, nodding.
Are you nervous?
I shook my head, a lie, but I wasn't giving in to any of that. I wasn't going to give him a single reason to deny me this.
I have tried to hold myself back, but once we get in there, I can't promise to only be a gentleman.
That was music to my ears. I wanted nothing more than to be rid of my dress that had become a skirt. I tugged at it.
I'll get you out of that. Don't worry.
I kissed him as a thank you. He moaned without reservation. The kiss was ultimately one step up from a peck, and yet he still looked intoxicated.
I love your lips.
I kissed him again, slowly this time, enough to see stars. He was growing more and more eager, his lips swollen, body tightening against me, his cock almost touching beneath my thighs from up in his hold.
Your bedroom? Unless you'd rather we... out here.
I pointed over my shoulder. The shop was small. He'd be able to find it easily. And thankfully he did.
It's gorgeous in here.
He was so sweet, I smiled.
You've been awfully quiet.
I breathed out a laugh. I'm sorry. I worried if I talked too much it would put a damper on this whole thing. He knitted his eyebrows together.
How exactly?
I tend to ramble when I'm nervous or apologize excessively. It's better I show you how I feel rather than tell you. You can tell already, can't you? You can feel it in my soul.
I mean, I can, but I want to listen to anything you have to say. You can tell me anything.
I felt silly, almost guilty for doing so. I'd overreacted in fear of backing out. I'm scared I'll give in to my defeatist thoughts.
I understand. But it's you I desire. I knew the worst of what your soul had to say already. You're not going to scare me away so easily.
I suppose men I've been with in the past would get bothered by me speaking during such times. A dark look overtook his expression.
Those were boys you were with before. I told you before, hadn't I?
He smirked devilishly.
I am no boy.
A wave of relief and even more intense craving took over me. I would only be blessed so many times in my life if this were a demon here to prey on my weak will and drain me dry, then I'd have let him. Nothing was going to keep me from making him mine, even just for tonight. I need those off, Carrick. I pointed to his pants. My dress, too.
Your wish is my command.
He set me down onto the bed, bending down to remove the dress whilst checking my expression the entire time. Candlelight flickered off his alabaster skin. Soon I was freed and lay bare before him. Instead of doing what I expected him to do, he knelt down.
May I?
The answer is always yes, Carrick. I said almost impatiently, feeling the air on my womanhood waiting for it to be licked, sucked, filled, anything.
What about anticipation? I want to taste you. I've dreamt about it.
Usually, idle conversation in intimate settings was a sure way to kill the mood, but the combination of Carrick's voice and his concern, expressing his desires so openly, made me feel like I'd never felt before. I was sure that was a sign of things to come. Please?
Since you said it so sweetly.
Carrick didn't waste another moment, his hot breath right at my entrance, running a tongue up entirely of it to sample, his wings folded as he concentrated. He groaned, rolling his eyes back.
Oh, you taste like ambrosia.
I could only blink, feeling myself sodden just at the sound of him. His tongue had been quite large in my mouth. I hadn't anticipated how it would feel elsewhere, but it was nothing short of heavenly. It started slow, much like our kiss, before testing what... Damn. He kissed it sweetly, before jutting his tongue in and familiarizing himself with my taste. He was erasing all my thoughts of what my breath smelt like, how I must have tasted, what I looked like. All I could think about was how wonderful he looked between my legs. I did what I could not to compress his head between my thighs as he sped up his licking and his lips dragged across my own.
You can wrap your legs around me. I won't suffocate.
I hesitated for a moment.
And if I do, there's no better way I'd want to go.
His permission was all I needed. He sped up, circling his tongue inside me. What only helped was the sound he made as he drank me up. It was as if he was eating a peach given to him from the garden of the gods themselves. I could only hope I tasted just as sweet. Carrick? It only made him breathe harder. He squeezed my thighs affectionately, spurring me on. I tried to speak, but was interrupted by another jut of his tongue deep inside me. I ended up moaning for him, uncaring about the volume or how I must have sounded. I received no complaint. His tongue flowed my clit, stimulating it over and over again, almost paralyzing me with each new wave of pleasure. Just like everything else on him, his tongue was also massive, and he was doing the work of at least 3 normal tongues. It was already so good, and we hadn't even gotten to the main course yet. What started as something of a spectacle and slow and sensual had become visceral and animalistic over time, and as I slapped my hips down onto his face, he gripped my thighs tightly, helping me move with a little effort. I'm so close. Am I gonna come already? So fast? My hands clenched my bed sheets, body jolting with a scream for dear life as I came. The pleasure hadn't stopped there as Carrick lapped up all I'd given him. I rubbed at his scalp as he continued to murmur moans and prayers into my folds. I could only breathe, my chest heaving, body tingling and shaking, sweat coating my body. Carrick eventually pulled away, his mouth wet as he licked away at his lips, savoring every drop. He looked possessed.
My dreams didn't hold a candle to this. Do you need a break?
I shook my head, despite so very much needing a break. But seeing him like that, after he'd just given me quite possibly the greatest orgasm of my life, I couldn't let it end here just yet. I need to feel more of you. He tossed his hair back in one motion, standing up and shedding his pants finally. His wings spread open. His cock sprung out of the constraints in such a way that I was astonished they hadn't ripped off before. It bounced, the precum glistening in the moonlight. He looked unreal. I had to swallow. I don't think my mouth could fit over so much as the tip. It wouldn't stop me from trying to, however. There he stood, rock hard like an erotic statue. Even though I wanted to taste it for myself, what I wanted more was to feel it inside me. And the next moment he grabbed my legs, dragging me to the end of the bed. He dropped over me to kiss me, tasting the remnants of myself on him. It surprised me how little it bothered me. It was like I was tasting our essence. His cock touched my moist pussy, sending a wonderful wave of pleasure up my spine. He tensed against me, Don't hold yourself back.
I don't want to hurt you.
I don't mind a little pain. I need you to try. I have to feel you for myself. He swallowed, staring at me in awe. With a look of conviction, he grabbed my legs again, lifting me up against him like he had before, only this time with both of us naked. I was straddling his dick, delighted by the warmth as it reached all the way up past my ass. This wasn't going to be any small feat, but I'm sure even his head alone would be enough. It was a matter of if I could sufficiently return the favor. I rolled my hips down on him as he held me, hands first beneath my thighs before reaching under my ass to probably glide himself against me. The movement was easy and only became more so. The view was wonderful. His hulking shoulders flexed as they carried me, and I felt every square inch of his girth beneath me. I was almost dripping, feeling her combined wetness all over between my legs. With time, he spread my ass, squeezing and teasing, prodding his length near me, my entrance. I dropped my head, equally loving and hating the build-up.
I could come just like this,
he says, making me press a hand to my mouth, furiously blushing despite myself.
I'm dying to be inside of you.
What are you waiting for? I didn't let him answer. I need you inside me as well. I cringed as I said it.
You're precious. Try again. This time with meaning.
I squeezed my eyes shut in embarrassment. It was hard to maintain this level of confidence for so long. His hand reached for my entrance, along with his throbbing cock just below it. My eyes shot open.
Well, what do you want, my goddess?
I need you to fuck me, Carrick. I need you to stop talking, stop teasing, and start fucking me senseless. He only grinned, lifting up my ass and slipping into me slowly, painfully slowly, deliciously slowly, maddeningly slowly. My head dove into his shoulder.
Tell me if it's too much. We'll take as long as you need.
It's good, just been a while.
You're so tight. I don't know if I'll make it at this rate.
He closed his eyes, savoring how I felt around him. I sat back, taking another inch. Don't you dare. His eyebrows shot up, eyes widening in delight.
Is that a command?
You didn't wait all this time just to give in so soon, did you? He only responded with another inch. The pressure in my hips was apparent. I couldn't move with every inch after the sixth. How much is left? I gulped.
You're over halfway. This is more than enough for me. Don't push yourself.
I shushed him, swallowing another inch in retort. He hissed.
Fuck. I want to move. Please, let me move.
No, don't. We're not done yet. He blinked at me, licking his lips. Good boy. His face turned a bright crimson. He gripped me tighter, as if bracing himself. Despite saying he was no boy, he sure did seem to like it when I called him that. I reached down to feel for the remainder of his cock. It was as thick as it was long. I could only equate it to the size of an arm. No mortal man could live with such a thing. The blood rushing alone would kill them. Carrick looked tortured, but nowhere near losing his strength. I think you can move, just a little. Though I'd granted him permission, he hesitated for a moment before pulling out a bit and driving right back in. I tensed at the feeling of having every inch of my insides pressed against his member. However, it felt good, dangerously so. My knees quivered.
You feel so much better than I imagined to. Fuck.
I reached up for a horn to better steady myself. He twitched at the touch, and I retracted it in the same moment, fearing I'd upset him.
Be careful. Those are sensitive.
He said in a husky warning. I gave him a smug look, stroking the length of one with my hand as he continued to move inside me. Just the look of him was enough to make the movement easier.
Oh, you're so wet.
I think that's you.
Oh, it's definitely me.
He gave me a kiss, first one, then two, before settling on kissing me fully as he focused on thrusting into me. For a moment it was just glued lips as he located where I was most enjoying. He slipped out once completely before plunging in again. My knees buckled around him as he did so. He was being naughty now. I broke our kiss to tap his nose, gently scolding, stroking his horn with more vigor. The grooves felt wonderful against the muscles of my palm. Don't stop. I groaned as he slid deeper into me, giving me a moment to adjust to the new length before continuing. It was a sensation I was never going to forget. The resounding symphony of our moans, sighs, and the sounds of wet sex as we fully indulged in one another for the first time was a wonderful sound. The smell of sex clung in the air. It all worked to ground me in the moment, lest I ascend. My body moved all on its own, and before I knew it, I'd successfully taken all of him in. It was only then did he have the courage to plunge into me at the strength I knew he'd been holding back, and it nearly knocked all the wind out of me.
Shit, sorry.
I reached for his face, looking him in the eye as I spoke. That. I need more of that.
Are you sure?
I'm sure. I can take it. Just give me the chance. I won't break like your other little girlfriends. Carrick only smirked, shaking his head.
I have no use for young women. Never have.
I draped my arms around his neck. Are you saying that I'm your first older woman? I cooed.
The first in this lifetime. And, if you'll have me, my last.
I was a little taken aback by that. What did he mean exactly? Though asking such questions felt unnecessary with him completely inside me. By the time he moved again, I'd forgotten all about the specifics. It was as if he was meant to shut me up from ever asking again. I welcomed it. We both had full lives before one another, but this was about us now, in this moment. Carrick found a wonderful rhythm as he groped and squeezed my ass, spreading me open to better take his cock. My body bounced onto it, growing accustomed to the sensations as I reached euphoria like the lakes in which I'd never known before.
Oh, you really can take it. Oh, you're incredible. Everything about you drives me mad.
He growled into my neck, suckling and nibbling. I moved myself even more. This position is good, but it isn't enough.
Tell me what you want, as long as I can stay inside of you.
The prospect of even readjusting seemed like torture to him. Too bad for him, I was quite fond of the expression. As a result, I lifted myself off him with a great deal of our combined fluids dripping onto our legs as he exited me. We groaned in sadness and pleasure at the sensation.
We've made a mess.
I'm not done with you yet.
I'd hope not.
Lay me down and take me.
Yes, madam.
I gripped onto his horns then. He gasped, whimpering ever so slightly. What did I say about calling me madam?
I couldn't be more enchanted by you.
Was his only response. You want back inside of me? You'd better hurry, lest I dry out.
I won't let that happen.
He dropped me down onto my back, He watched as my body jiggled. He hovered over me, rewarding me with a series of wild kisses. My legs wrapped around him, begging silently to feel him again.
Quite impatient, aren't you?
Carrick, why must you play these games?
This is no game to me. I can't help but study you. Even now, everything you do captivates me. How does someone as wonderful as you
Whoops. Sorry guys, got a little excited. I couldn't answer, but I could ask him much the same.
You're self-made as well. Without interference of an angel or God, I'd have mistaken you for an angel. Your soul bleeds of it.
Carrick, please.
I'm denying you pleasure. My apologies. I'll make it up to you, my lady. I promise.
He sat up, reaching for his dick. Seeing its full length before me, I could hardly believe I managed to withstand a portion of it, let alone the whole thing. He went to say something, but stopped himself. I giggled at that, and he wanted to speak more. We'd have ample time once this was over, but it was time to finish what we started. I needed to come to completion by his hand. There was nothing in the world I wanted more than that moment. In one smooth, mind-numbing, euphoric motion, he sheathed his entire length into my pussy and held it there to adjust. He was conscious not to place too much of his weight on me, opting to stand on the edge of the bed so I could spread more effectively.
Oh, that's it. You're so good. You took it all like it was nothing.
It certainly wasn't nothing. I was just now starting to relax around it. He noticed just as well. He bared his teeth at this sensation. Patience? I ordered, and he nodded.
I've waited this long. I can endure.
I wondered how long he could hold out for exactly. I'd have to experiment and see how far I could push the limit. If I remember correctly, there were some aphrodisiac elixirs that would do a world of good when things were inevitably dull, though the prospect of needing anything in addition to the man before me was almost a non-starter. For him, however...
How long will you make me wait? You're quite cruel when you want to be.
Don't move. Allow me. He could only nod, a loss for words, as I pushed against him and adjusted myself onto his length as if he were nothing more than a tool to be used. He stared down at me, growing increasingly more roused, while also growing equally impatient.
You are perfection, my lady. Every inch of you. Please allow me to show you how much I crave you.
I pushed until my hips moved on their own. I could easily have finished myself just like this, but I needed more. I needed him to do as he promised. Carrick, move. I need to come. He thrust before I had gotten the words out. I felt much better, much more than what I was capable of. I watched as his statuesque, monstrous form dominated me completely. There was no mercy. I thoroughly teased him.
Oh, I wish I was stronger. Oh, I'd let you use me as you please. Alas, I'm not strong enough to withstand. I have to feel you for myself.
It's okay, my sweet. Make it up to me. I told him as easily as breathing. The pressure somehow increased. The sounds of our slapping skin entangled, the moans and echoed all throughout the shop. As soon what were just moans were now screams as wave after wave after wave of perfect pleasure hit me in the right spot that I needed most. Sweat shone off his body in a perfect layer, making him look even prettier than before. He looked worn and messy, all used up.
I can't hold out. I'm sorry. I need to. Can I finish inside? I'm going mad. I can't see straight.
His words were staggered as he spoke through a salivated mouth. I nodded.
My lady, can I? Your orders, please. Oh.
Come in me. The thrust increased to a speed I was sure was going to break my bed off its hinges. More surprisingly, it didn't break me. Though, with how it felt, I wouldn't have minded if it had done early either. Carrick, harder, deeper. I screamed as a flash of pure white light hit me, even though my eyes had closed. He slammed his hips one final time into me, staying as he clutched my knees. I felt a pool of hot seed flood my stomach, pussy, before spilling out onto the bed below us.
Fuck.
He cursed, shaking along with me as he continued to fill me. It was silent as we both recovered from our combined orgasm. I nearly forgot where I was. It wasn't until Carrick exited me that I had come back to reality, now sitting over top of the mess we'd made.
My sincerest apologies. I should have held you instead. It would have been easier to clean.
I shook my head. Enough apologies. Come here. I patted the side of the bed as I lay weak. Sweetly, he sat by my side, lifting my upper body into his arms and chest. Despite being made of stone, he felt plenty warm and human. The smell of incense and salt. I looked up at him, puckering my lips. He captured them only a moment later. I broke the kiss, resting my eyes as he listened to his still racing heart. You feel human.
You sound surprised.
Aren't you a stone creature?
I have the capacity to become stone, just as I have the capacity to appear human. I am both. I didn't think you'd want to make love to marble.
I giggled. With the way I'd pleasured myself on his still figure before, I definitely wasn't opposed to the idea. He must have read my mind.
Whatever form you prefer, that's what I'll provide.
There was no other form I'd prefer more than this. Sure, the human form of Carrick was enough to entice a fantasy, but the way I felt about this form, and every aspect of it, I'd never longed for a human man as long as I shall live. I'd sooner go to statues. At least they had the capacity to make me orgasm. I stared adoringly up at him, being whisked away by a peace I hadn't felt in ages. As I pushed a strand of my hair back, admiring me as much as I had him. You look tired.
Don't stay up on my account.
Do you sleep?
Yes, just during the day. The remaining time, I keep watch. I'll be watching for the return of that drunkard.
My guardian.
I'd like to be. More than that, I'd like to be yours. In body and in soul. I know that I can't rush such things. I've had far more time than you. But I hope you'll consider it. Your life is, of course, your own, and I don't want to intrude on it.
Carrick, it's true I don't know what that truly entails for me. It sounds wonderful, as all fantasies do, but you're stone for at least half of my life. I could never do with you what others do with their own partners. I don't long for children. Marriage has always been optional, but they're impossible with you.
You're not wrong. It's a lot to ask. I just know if I don't, I'll regret it all my life.
Do you not have other prospects?
You mean partners? I've had them, but when I move, I live a new life, under a new name. The men I was before are no longer me. The man that I am today belongs to you.
How long will it last? How long until you seek a new home and a new identity?
I don't know. But what I do know is that this is the longest I've been in one place for a century. Your presence, seeing you day in and day out, your soul has kept me here. It's also caused me to question everything I know about mortal living. Most importantly, I believe that instead of seeking humans out for pleasure, I've found someone with whom I'd like to forge a bond with in soul. I always knew, however, that this was always a possibility. You may not need me in your life, but I'm afraid as things stand, I need you in mine, even if it's just as your friend or guardian.
My heart was tormented by straining and aching alike. He always had a way of speaking that resonantly so deep. The decision was still my own, but somehow that made it harder. He wasn't forcing his way into my life. He knew who I was and what my life consisted of, and wanted me anyway. I just wish you'd given me more than tonight to decide such things. If I knew you more, I would have the tools to make an informed decision, to tell you with certainty what I want. Carrick nodded, understanding despairingly, not having tried sooner.
I also needed time to decide I wanted to do this. I hadn't planned to today either, but once the opportunity presented itself, I threw caution to the wind. We've had a wonderful night, one I'm sure to never forget, no matter how many lives I live. I'm glad that you gave me the chance. I cannot ask any more of you than that. I can only hope that you'll give me more. But no matter what your answer is, I will not resent you. Your decisiveness, your honesty, and integrity are just a few of the many things I fell in love with.
In love? He's in love with me?
I'm in love with you. I know you can't return that sentiment just yet, but I believe if you got to know me, you'd be able to fall in love with me too. So, what will it be?
Yeah, we're just gonna go in for it. I want to be with you. Carrick looked surprised, like he prepared for me to say anything else.
Are you sure?
I nodded, stroking his cheek. And I don't regret it.
A glowing review.
He chuckled. I swatted his nose with my finger. You've surprised me, brought out a side of myself I thought was lost.
I didn't do much. Just reminded you of who you already were. I'm glad I could help in any way I could.
I'm sure you are.
I'm at your beck and call whenever you want to feel better about yourself.
I smiled shyly.
So, we're lovers, then? You won't have any more relations with boys?
And you won't with girls? He shook his head.
Absolutely not. I believe you've just ruined me for all other prospects forever.
A tad dramatic, aren't we? He shook his head once more.
You are part of my being. I am no longer myself without you. I hope with time, I can become the same for you.
I believe I will. I don't think I'd have agreed to any of this if I didn't see potential.
Good. Very good.
He looked incredibly relieved.
I may not be here when you awake, but know that I will be here every night before you go to sleep.
He placed a gentle kiss to my forehead as I began to drift asleep. Comforted in his arms, comforted that he would return, that this was wasn't just a single night's worth of excitement and comfort.
Sleep well, my love.
I drifted off into a wonderful, dreamless sleep. As I opened the shop the following day, I could feel Carrick's eyes on me as I worked. I was beaming beneath them, sweeping and humming a pleasant tune, all the way until the sun fell again. I longed to share another night full of chats and caressing. Carrick was at the door as soon as the sun had left. He continued to watch me as I closed, leaning against the counter with that familiar, impish expression. We chatted idly about what he'd seen, and questions of what I'd done, sharing stories, laughters, and flattering words. It became our everyday routine. He fit perfectly into my life. I knew I'd have to love someone like him is something that could only have ever been achieved when I had one first for myself. This was my life, and I was grateful he wanted to be part of it, but he hadn't, and that was okay too. To have been acknowledged for my hard work, loved from a distance, and worshipped in the heat of the night, those were things that I deserved. To be cared for, thoughts of it in the same way I had for others. If I continued to treat others the way I wanted to be treated, then that kind of love would find me, whether it be as a lover, a friend, or somewhere in between. I was happy to have him for as long as it lasted. If he decided he wanted to live a new life free from me, I cared for him enough to let him have it. As long as he had the respect to come to me first about it, then I could ask for nothing more. And if he never left my side, always watching me, and left before early morning sun, then I could ask for nothing more. No matter what was to happen from this moment onward, what we had was carved into my heart like stone. The end. Okay, so that was carved in stone. Y'all hate it. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.